Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Back in high school, I was that quiet, introverted girl who kept to herself and struggled with self-esteem issues. My parents' divorce during my freshman year hit me pretty hard, and I found myself seeking validation in all the wrong places. That's when I first noticed him, the popular athlete who seemed to have everything going for him. He was tall, good-looking, and always surrounded by his crowd of admirers. At first, he would just make snide remarks when passing me in the hallways. He'd tell me to take a picture since it would last longer, and his friends would laugh while I ducked my head and hurried away. But somehow, in my mixed-up teenage brain, I interpreted his attention, even the negative kind, as interest. I started following his social media accounts, memorizing his schedule, and finding excuses to be wherever he was. I can admit now that my behavior wasn't healthy, but I was completely infatuated. Then one day, he started acting differently. He began sending me messages on social media, acting friendly, even flirty. He messaged me saying he had noticed me around and thought I seemed sweet. When I expressed surprise and mentioned I thought he hated me, he brushed it off, claiming he was just playing around. He even used that classic line about me being different from other girls. This went on for weeks. He built me up just to tear me down, but I was too caught up in the attention to see the manipulation. Then came the messages on Snapchat. He started asking for photos, inappropriate ones. I was 16 and desperate for his approval. He tried to convince me by saying I should trust him because he really liked me. When I expressed uncertainty and told him I'd never done anything like that before, he promised it would be our secret. I sent them. The shame was immediate, but he kept reassuring me that it was our special thing. 2 months later, I overheard some girls in the bathroom. One asked if the other had heard what he did, and her friend confirmed that he had shown everyone my photos at a party, revealing it was all for a dare. I threw up in the bathroom that day. The humiliation was unbearable. 2 years later, when I was 18 and should have known better, he reached out again. He'd refined his manipulation tactics by then. He sent me a long message apologizing for his past behavior, claiming he had changed and thought about me all the time. Like an idiot, I fell for it again. More photos, more humiliation, more trauma. I started seeing a therapist after that. She helped me understand that none of it was my fault. I was a victim of psychological manipulation and abuse. Still, it took years to rebuild my self-worth. College became my fresh start. I found genuine friends who actually cared about me. My roommate became like a sister to me, and our friend group was fiercely protective once I told them my story. My roommate even declared that, if she ever saw that creep, she would make him regret being born. But karma had other plans. Last winter, while I was waiting at the train station to head back to campus after break, my phone buzzed with a message from my friend back home. She excitedly told me that karma had finally caught up with that scumbag. She sent me a link to a news article. Turns out, I wasn't the only girl he'd targeted. He'd been caught with inappropriate materials involving minors and was now on the sex offenders registry. The military cadet program he'd been so proud of getting into, they kicked him out, along with taking away his scholarship. But it gets better. Just last week, I heard that he either got expelled or had to transfer from his university altogether. Apparently, he'd done something so bad that the school wanted nothing to do with him anymore. When I told my roommate the news, she just smiled knowingly and said that the universe takes care of trash all by itself. I'm thriving now. Dean's List 3 semesters in a row, great internship lined up, and surrounded by people who actually care about me. Meanwhile, he's watching his life crumble, piece by piece, facing repercussions for the kind of person he chose to be. This story takes place on a chilly November evening a couple of years ago. I've been going through a rough patch and really needed a night out with friends. My close friend from China, who I'd met in college about a year prior, had become part of our friend group. She is one of those genuinely kind souls who sees good in everyone, which is why she also befriended this other woman who I never got along with. I got a text from one of my friends asking if I wanted to join them for dinner and shopping. I was hesitant because that woman would be there, but I decided to go anyway. There would be 4 other people, so I figured it wouldn't be too bad. The moment I arrived at our meeting spot, I knew I'd made a mistake. Karen immediately made a nasty comment about how my dress made me look fat and that I was way too overdressed. I'm 5'9" and 54 kilograms. Definitely not fat. I was wearing a simple red dress and heels, perfectly appropriate for the formal restaurant we were heading to. I shot her a cold glare and deliberately complimented everyone else's outfits except hers. Dinner went surprisingly well aside from Karen's constant attempts to steal attention. We left around 6:30 p.m. to go shopping. I needed some household items, and everyone wanted to look at clothes and accessories. We ended up at this trendy boutique. While my friend and I were at the back looking at clothes and catching up about her upcoming wedding, we heard commotion from the front of the store. Karen was loudly gushing over how cute and small a baby was, while the young mother was nervously asking her to step away from her baby. We rushed to the front to find Karen hovering over a sleeping newborn in a stroller. The mother looked uncomfortable, but Karen kept getting closer. She continued cooing over the baby, commenting on how cute he was, and then had the audacity to criticize the mother for having the baby out so late. The mother looked at us desperately. My friend from China tried to intervene, telling Karen she was too close and should leave them alone. Karen dismissively told her to get lost, insisting she wasn't hurting anyone. The baby woke up and started fussing. What happened next was absolutely shocking. Karen announced she was going to hold the baby. When the mother refused and told her to leave them alone, Karen wouldn't listen. She actually suggested that the mother could go shopping and come back for her baby later. As Karen reached for the car seat buckles, the mother's hand came down fast and hard across her face. The slap echoed through the store. Karen screamed in pain and outrage, demanding to know why she'd been hit. The baby started screaming as we tried holding Karen back while she lunged at the mother. Karen started shrieking, calling the mother a witch. The mother yelled at Karen to stay away from her baby while we all tried to calm Karen down. She responded with expletives, completely out of control. The store employees called the police while trying to keep Karen away from the mother. When the officers arrived, they took everyone's statements. The mother was too exhausted to press charges and just wanted to leave to comfort her crying baby. Karen's wealthy parents would have probably gotten her out of trouble anyway, but she didn't walk away completely unscathed. The store banned her permanently, and when the story spread through our social circle, she lost quite a few friends. I later heard she had to attend mandatory counseling sessions after her parents finally realized her behavior wasn't normal. I definitely regretted going out that night, though I did get some cute outfits and had a nice dinner with friends. The only thing I didn't get was a toilet paper I originally needed. My cousin's wife discovered his affair 3 months ago. Not just any affair. He was stealing money from their joint accounts to fund his luxurious outings with his mistress. That discovery led to a chain of events that exposed just how entitled and toxic some members of my family really are. My aunt, his mother, always treated him like a precious prince who could do no wrong. Even when the evidence of his financial and emotional abuse came to light, she stood by his side. Now he's in prison for fraud, and his soon-to-be ex-wife is finally breaking free from years of manipulation. I've had my own history with the family's entitled behavior. For years, I tried to keep the peace, always being the diplomatic one, always trying to smooth things over. But watching my cousin's wife stand up for herself gave me the courage to finally put my foot down. The real drama unfolded when my aunt and uncle went to collect my cousin's belongings. My cousin's wife called me afterward to tell me what happened. My aunt had called her in a rage, demanding to know how she dared to divorce her precious son after everything he had supposedly given her. My cousin's wife waited patiently for the rant to end before calmly telling her that she should be grateful there weren't additional charges for financial abuse, as there was plenty of evidence. She added that since my aunt loved her son so much, she could have him all to herself, since my aunt had always made it clear she thought a wife's only purpose was to provide children and serve her husband's every need. My cousin's wife had learned from my past experiences and recorded everything. She's become an inspiration to me, refusing to let anyone play the family card to manipulate her. She even told me I had been too forgiving in the past and should have stood up to them sooner. She's right. Then my aunt started targeting me. She called my husband and me, making demands that we fix everything and beg for forgiveness for supposedly tearing the family apart. We recorded the calls, hung up, and blocked her. But she wasn't done. Somehow she found out where I lived. One day, while my husband and children were out with our new Rottweiler mix at the vet, she showed up at my door. Thanks to our security cameras, I watched the whole meltdown from my couch, still recovering from a recent medical procedure. From my spot on the couch, I watched through the camera as she screamed at my door, demanding I come out and fix what I had supposedly done to her son. I remained silent, continuing to observe through the camera feed as she grew more aggressive, shouting that I should have given him whatever he wanted because that's how things were done in this family. Her medieval mindset about women existing only to serve men became crystal clear. When I didn't respond, she completely lost it. She started throwing anything she could find at my house while screaming threats about how she was going to destroy me for what I had done to her son. The police arrived shortly after, having been called by concerned neighbors. They arrested her for vandalism and making threats. The whole incident was caught on camera, providing perfect evidence for the no-contact order we were pursuing. My cousin's wife got that job she was hoping for and is thriving in her new life. She's working with lawyers and social services to determine if my aunt should have any access to her grandchildren, given her violent tendencies. My husband jokes that he must be adopted because he can't believe he's related to such entitled people. He isn't, but I understand the sentiment. We're much happier now with our boundaries firmly in place, our security system armed, and our protective Rottweiler mix keeping watch. My ex and I dated for 2 years in college before I realized we wanted different things in life. She wanted to settle down immediately and start a family, while I wanted to focus on my career and travel. After college, I landed my dream job as a software engineer and spent 3 years building my career. That's when I met my now wife at a tech conference. She was brilliant, independent, and shared my passion for adventure. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. When we started planning our wedding, my best friend warned me that my ex had been asking around about me. Apparently, she'd been telling people we were meant to be together and that any other relationship I had was just a phase. I brushed it off as harmless talk. Again, I was wrong. Our wedding day started perfectly. The venue was a beautiful historic church, and everything was going according to plan until 15 minutes before the ceremony. My cousin ran into the groom's room completely out of breath. He urgently told me I needed to come see what was happening outside, explaining that my ex was there with a group of people trying to get in. I thought he was joking, but when I peeked through the window, there she was, my ex wearing a white dress, surrounded by 5 people I'd never seen before. One of them was wearing what looked like a priest's collar. My best man asked if she was actually wearing a wedding dress. I could only mutter that this couldn't be happening. Before we could react, they had already pushed past the ushers and burst into the church. My ex walked down the aisle like she owned the place. She loudly announced that the wedding needed to stop immediately. The guests were stunned into silence. My fiancé's father stood up, but my ex just talked over him, declaring she was here to save me from making the biggest mistake of my life. She introduced the man with her as Father Michael, saying she'd brought him to perform our ceremony instead. The man in the collar stepped forward looking extremely uncomfortable. Later we found out he was just an actor she'd hired from Craigslist. I told her she needed to leave immediately, but she wouldn't listen. She insisted that I was just confused and that we belonged together, claiming she had proof. That's when she signaled to one of her friends, who brought forward a baby carrier. My heart nearly stopped until she lifted the blanket, revealing a disturbingly realistic-looking doll. She proudly announced that this was my son, claiming she'd gotten him to look just like me. The real priest, who had been watching this unfold with his mouth open, finally found his voice and called for security. My ex started pleading, saying we didn't understand and begging me to tell everyone about our supposed plans together. My fiance's brother, who thankfully worked as a security consultant, had already called for backup. Two security guards arrived, but my ex wasn't going quietly. She started screaming about how I couldn't do this to our child and that we were a family. When they tried to remove her, she grabbed the doll and threw it at me. It hit me in the chest and fell to the floor, its head popping off and rolling under a pew. Several guests screamed. My fiance's mother announced she was calling the police. The security guards managed to drag my ex and her entourage out, but not before she made one final scene screaming that this wasn't over, that we were soulmates, and that my fiance was a witch who had brainwashed me. The police arrived minutes later and arrested her for trespassing and disturbing the peace. My fiance's family, being well connected with several lawyers, had already started the paperwork for a restraining order before we even said our vows. We resumed the ceremony 30 minutes later, though I'm pretty sure none of our guests were paying attention to the vows. They were all too busy watching the doors. During the reception, my new mother-in-law presented us with a gift-wrapped envelope, joking that since they weren't sure what to get us for our wedding, they figured a lifetime restraining order might come in handy. A week later, when we were on our honeymoon, my best friend sent me a link to my ex's social media. She'd posted a long rant about how the fake bride had hired actors to pretend to be security guards and had her wrongfully arrested. The post was accompanied by photos of her having a fake wedding ceremony with a reborn doll propped up in a tiny tuxedo. She has now been ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation and counseling as part of her plea deal. The restraining order covers not just me and my wife, but our entire extended family, our workplace, and any future children we might have. My wife jokes that it's the most romantic wedding gift we received. The priest she hired later sent us a written apology, explaining that she had told him it was for a surprise vow renewal ceremony where the bride was in on the joke. He even testified against her in court, which helped make the restraining order permanent. My wife and I ended up moving to a different city for a job opportunity, but we occasionally hear updates through mutual friends. My ex had finally started taking her therapy seriously after the judge threatened to convert her suspended sentence into jail time. She sold all her reborn dolls on eBay and started volunteering at an animal shelter instead. Her therapist apparently suggested she focus on caring for real beings rather than living in fantasy. The whole experience became something of a legend at our workplaces. New employees eventually heard whispers about the wedding crasher with a broken baby, though most assumed it was an urban legend. My wife's brother, the security consultant, now uses our story in his corporate training sessions as an example of why proper event security matters, though he keeps all names anonymous, of course. Sometimes when we look at our wedding photos, we can see the exact moment in the background when the doll's head went rolling under the pew. Our photographer accidentally captured it perfectly, a blur of plastic and synthetic hair flying past horrified guests. We decided to keep that photo in our album. After all, as my wife says, it's proof that our love literally survived a crazy ex throwing a baby at it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.